It's a good example of this. There's two or three, or maybe the one hits the nail on the head, and essentially that was how it came to be. So
Yeah, excellent. We already touched on this a little bit, but I think it's worth diving deeper into the evolution kind of a few of these traders, because a lot of them started in the day trading time frame, and then at least the earlier chapters. I'm still reading the whole book, but and then there's this evolution, lengthening the time frame, switching from going short predominantly to going long. Any observations on your guys' side about kind of the evolution process and what allowed these traders to be so dynamic and allow them to shift kind of different perspectives and still have great success with it. Jack, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. First of all, this ability to change, that's another key trait that I pointed out in a number of Marco Russo books. The adaption ability, the flexibility, that's part of that's part of the formula. In terms of these traders, part of it is just when they, as you, well, the ones who started out with day trading or started out selling small cap stocks, uh, they obviously they made their initial millions like that, and it's all fine and good. But they realized, they come to a point that said, wait a minute, this is good, but I could do better. Like Lance, sort of said, hey, I'm he's doing great. He's the firm's best trader, and he was for a number of years running, and decided this rule of only day trading was kind of holding him back. He could do a lot better if he could hold the position, some of these positions, and he's the type of trader who knows that he shouldn't be getting out at near the end of the day. If he holds it, it's going to go further. So he left basically so he could trade his stock, be free of that, and then he went on in the next 4 or 5 years, turns a few, turns it into 70, 80 million when we interviewed him. So he was absolutely right about that. And other traders come to the same realization. The high school Froelich was a high school kid that you mentioned, and sold his bike because just because to cover his losses and anyway, but he goes on and he also starts off short term, small cap stocks and but ultimately decides really the big money is on longer term stocks and sometimes as if one of the traders goes from smaller cap to mid cap and develops a strategy with it and realizes that strategy is only going to work in bull markets and then has to branch out and come up with a strategy that's will work in more varied situations. George, you want to comment?
yeah, I think not everybody can adapt. Just to make it clear, and I think it comes down to kind of goals and temperament. So, two of the guys in the book, we called them cash registers behind the scene because they almost never lose money. They're like just it's like a W-2 paycheck. And they were very comfortable where they lived. One of them in particular just had no real tolerance for risk and losses. And so I think he would like to adopt a strategy that allows him to make more money, but it just doesn't suit who he is. And then I guess the flip side of the coin is almost everybody that was a parabolic shorter moved away from it, and I think it was for a few reasons. One of them is there's a lot of stress affiliated with that strategy, associated with that strategy. There's a lot of risk. You get these stocks that jump up a bunch and they're going to collapse, but maybe they go up a couple thousand% and then it's game over. So those two reasons I think make people want to migrate away from that strategy. The lifestyle, you're living in front of that screen and you're watching every tick because if it starts to halt or gets halted, you got to be there. And so I think in the case of Phil Gettiker, he wanted to spend less time in front of the screen. And then there's scalability. And that strategy can only do so much capital. So I think it's this blend depending on the trader of, what do I want to accomplish? What can I tolerate? What are my goals? And all of that combines, and then they find a way to get away from it. But I guess in aggregate, yeah, I do think a pattern is people who start with that parabolic shorting get away from it because I think it's too much for any person to sustain over the very long haul.
Do you think there's any edge erosion going on with that too? Because a lot of these traders, they're on social media a lot. They're sharing their strategies, all that. So I'd be curious to hear kind of your guys' perspective on that. If that's also kind of limiting the opportunities or the effectiveness of the setup in general.
I mean, I could comment on that. We asked a couple of them about that, and the answers are in the book. But you know, They said that there have been instances before where these strategies were mentioned at conferences or in different books, maybe not as popular as the Wizard series, but they said it would create sort of temporary aberrations, but things tended to go back to normal. And the fundamental reality of shorting small caps is essentially there's going to be small cap companies. They're going to there's going to be financial shenanigans. They're going to do things to get their stock to run up. They're going to need working capital. That's going to cause the stocks to come back down. So I think by and large, the guys believe that maybe this strategy being discussed more because of this book or related media could have a short-term impact, but the long-term, I guess we'll call them fundamental realities, are pretty much going to be there unless or until somebody comes in and puts a stop to it. So I think they think it'll persist and be a strategy that's viable long-term. Now, that said, it does evolve, and I think 20 years ago, like a guy like Phil Geddeker, not to keep coming back to him, but he would just short him and stay short because it didn't cost 300% annualized to borrow, and that's changed. And then the intraday patterns have changed. So it'll definitely evolve. It's not going to be a strategy where you can just short in the morning, come back and cover at dark or at the close and you're done. But I think they believe the fundamental realities behind the strategy are inherently going to remain.
Yeah, excellent. And the best traders will evolve with it as it changes. One question I did have is going back actually to Lucas. I think my favorite line that I've heard so far is his drive to get out of high school